Well, good evening and welcome. Can I have everybody's attention, please? My name's Jim Farrell. I'm the mayor of Federal Way. It's my pleasure and my honor to have you here. Thank you so much. You know, oftentimes when we have these public meetings, we wonder, are we going to have many people here? And this is exactly what we like to see. I want to let you know, as your mayor, and I've got my, I'm going to do introductions here in just a few moments, but one of the things that we have heard over the past, I've been mayor now about 2 years, just a month shy of 2 years, and one of the things we've been hearing is increased concern on this issue. And so that's why we're here today. I'm going to go over the ground rules, I'm going to do introductions, but this is absolutely what we like to see. We've got some great people here that are going to answer some questions for you, and we'll talk about those ground rules. To give you a little bit of background, you know, one of the first things I did when I became mayor in the beginning of 2014 is I went down to the airport, met with their leadership, talked with the FAA people, and talked about this issue and got a tour. The communication with the airport has been continuous along with FAA. Then I would say what really prompted this meeting was we had quite a number of concerns from the community that we were receiving in a variety of ways. You know, phone, email, communication through council and community members. We communicated that to the airport. We actually had quite a large delegation of folks from the airport, many of which are, actually all of which are here today, along with the FAA. We met in my office. I would say my Chief of Staff, Brian Wilson here, who's going to be helping this evening, he and I and other staff met with these folks in my office, and as a result of that meeting, we're having this meeting today. So I think before we get started, I just want to say we really appreciate, and I think it's important for us to appreciate their presence tonight, and we want to hear from them, and we want to make sure the dialogue is respectful and that we get your questions answered. So let's go over this, sort of the ground rules and how we're going to go. Do you all have an agenda? No? How many did we, there are, okay. If we have quite a number of, if you could raise your hand and we'll get you as many as you can. And if you need to actually, you know, borrow one or look over at your neighbors, maybe you could share to the extent. But Kathy's going to get those out to folks. So we have the stations in the back. And when we're done with this meeting, the personnel from the airport and the FAA are going to go back to their stations. I got to get my readers out so I can actually read what's on the page. Sorry, hold on. So the stations, if you want to stay after that, or if you want to meander back there during the meeting, there are a number of different stations. Noise abatement procedures and noise monitoring. Number 2, contours, noise remedy, boundary, part 150 recommendations. Number 3, airport growth and regional economic benefits. Number 4, Port of Seattle environmental programs. And number 5, FAA. So those programs are in the back. So right now we're obviously doing the introductions. I'll introduce the folks in just a few moments. I'd like to go over the ground rules just real quickly. You know, I think it's important that we stay on schedule. We need to be out of here at a particular time by about 8:30. So I will stop talking here pretty soon, I promise. I think it's important that all questions, comments, and opinions expressed in a courteous and respectful manner. I think we all know that. And I know that this is a highly charged, for some of us, for many of us, this is a highly charged, you know, we understand that. But what we want to do, thank you, Judy, but what we want to do is make sure that you can get your point across and get your answer. And so I want to make sure that that's accomplished. If you have any questions or comments that we can, you know, in more detail, let us know, and we'll do that. We can always, once we have your email addresses, it's very important, you guys, very, very important. Before you leave tonight, if you have not written down your email address, make sure you get your email address on those yellow sheets, because we will keep you informed, and it's a great way to keep communication with us, because we need to hear from you. You know, we want to hear about your experiences and obviously, you know, speak candidly about that. We value participation in your presence. We want the exchange of ideas, and we want to listen and understand about what's going on. So, with the introductions, we've got our panel members here, and then I'm going to introduce also the other individuals that are here. We've got David Soumi, the Regional Administrator, or the acting, for FAA Northwest Mountain Region. We've got Todd C. Thomas, Manager of Sea-Tac Terminal Radar Approach Control. FAA Air Control Air Traffic Organization, and Stan Shepard, Manager, Airport Noise Programs, Sea-Tac International Airport. We also have, is Chris Ramirez here? Chris Ramirez, Operations Support Group Manager, FAA Air Traffic Organization, Western Service Center. Steve Carnes, Next Gen Special Projects Manager, FAA. Where's Steve? All right, thank you. Diane Fuller, Senior Advisor to Regional Administrator, FAA Northwest Mountain Region. All the way in the back, okay. We've already introduced Stan Shepard. Marco Milanese, and he is Community Relations Manager, Aviation, Community Development, Sea-Tac Airport. Linda Stewart, Director, Community Partnerships, Sea-Tac International Airport. And we've met with Linda several times, and she's in the back of the room as well. And Linda Wolpa, Port of Seattle. Council members, I saw Council Member Bob Selsky, Federal Way City Council Member Bob. Where are you, Bob? Thank you for being here. We've got our Deputy Mayor, Gene Burbidge. Do we have any other elected officials present? All right. So I've gone over the ground rules. I think at this time, we're pretty much, I think, time's at a premium. You probably saw the comment sheet that we want to limit, we want to try to limit comments to about a minute. If you need to finish your thought, we're not going to be draconian about it, but we've got a lot of people here, and we want to get to as many questions as we can, okay? So we'll have, we'll try to get moving on this as soon as possible. So we're going to hear from the presentations, the Port of Seattle and the FAA. So at this point, I will turn it over to David Swomo to provide our introduction. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Again, my name is Dave Soumi. I'm the Regional Administrator, Acting Regional Administrator for the Northwest Mountain Region. And I'm going to ask that Stan go ahead and kick it off. He's got the first slide, and it's going to bounce back to me. And then we're going to go ahead and get into a little bit of discussion here in terms of what we can't do and what's happening with technology and the industry going forward. But I certainly want to thank everyone for showing up tonight before we begin to come out and share your experiences, your views with what's happening so we can better understand. We're here to listen tonight and to try to seek that understanding. And thank you, Mayor Farrell, for your gracious hospitality in setting this up, your staff. We appreciate it very, very much. With that, Stan? Should be.
We're here tonight to provide as much information.
No, it's not on.
Hold on, you guys. Let's just give him that one. All right. Do you mind standing up, please?
Sure, I can stand up, no problem. In fact, it gives me a little bit of maneuvering here to do. We're here to provide you a little bit of information. So I know we're going to present a lot of things to you. So if you have questions during the end, we would be glad to answer them for you. And we'll be out, like we said, at the stations. The staff and I will all be out there to be able to answer most of the questions that you have. Just to give you a little bit of perspective of the different agencies that are here tonight, we have the Port of Seattle, which is what I'm with, and we are the ones that actually operate the facilities at the airport. So the runways and the terminals, that sort of thing is what the Port of Seattle operates. We're the ones designated to provide the community outreach and the information on noise programs, where airplanes are flying, why they're flying there, that sort of thing. And we implement noise mitigation strategies, which I'm going to talk about here in just a little while. And then I'm actually turn it over to David here just one more time to go over the FAA's role.
Yeah, thank you, Stan. Just to be clear, the FAA's role in all of this is that we are responsible for managing the national airspace system. Everything that moves in the air ultimately is under the control and with the responsibility of the FAA to have the safe and efficient operation in the airspace and to and from the airports. I want to mention airports because that's one of the factors that comes into giving us more or less flexibility depending upon the area, because we do operate a system of airports. And here, just for example, in this area, besides Sea-Tac Airport, which is one of the primary players, we also have to incorporate airspace from Renton Airport, from Payne Field, from Tacoma Narrows, from, there's one more, Boeing Field, yes, thank you. Drawing a mental block there. And also do that with other FAA facilities besides the air traffic control towers, the terminal radar approach control, which you'll be hearing a little bit more about in a few minutes, and also with Seattle Center. So it is a system. We're responsible for it. We control aircraft noise through various procedures and management in the airspace. And we have to do it in a way that's consistent with FAA safety standards. Many times, what appears to be a simple fix can't be done because it does not lend itself to being a safe operation, which is our primary mission. So you're going to hear a little bit more about that. And we help ensure the use of noise abatement procedures that I think Stan is going to touch on right now. So more to come a little bit later on our role, but right now I'm going to turn it back over to Stan. Thanks.
And this really is a team effort between the airport operator and the FAA when it comes to noise management and understanding the air traffic. So we operate what we call noise abatement procedures, and part of those are trying to keep aircraft within a corridor south of the airport. We have noise abatement procedures north of the airport, but today, since we're here at the Guesta Federal Way, we're focusing on the south end. And what those noise abatement procedures do is they keep aircraft within the narrow corridor on the departure until they reach 5 nautical miles south of the airport and at least 3,000 feet before making the turn. Just to give you a perspective of what Todd's team is dealing with in the air traffic control section, there's a lot of airplanes out there. And when we focus on Sea-Tac, we're looking at the blue and the red traffic out there. The blue is also mixed in of Boeing field traffic. That's a lot of traffic to manage on a daily basis, and to try to keep them all separated for safety and efficiency getting into and out of these airports. So they do a great job on managing that, and they're going to talk a little bit more about how they do that here in a second. The airport is responsible for what we call a Part 150 noise and land use compatibility study, and we just completed this in 2014. What that is through the Federal Aviation Administration regulation, Part 150 of that regulation, it gives us a detailed guide in how we can go about providing mitigation to the community and understanding the noise impacts to the community. It's typically a 5-year plan, and it's really a comprehensive evaluation of the noise environment, and then it gives us those recommendations on what we can mitigate on the ground for the impacts of the airport. We had a very robust public outreach program with the Part 150 project. We held 5 public workshops. There were several hundred people that attended those workshops along the way. We held a lot of briefings to all of the city councils on what was taking place with the Part 150, including coming out here to Federal Way. And we held as many numerous elected official briefings as was requested at the time. Now, through the Part 150, it requires us to evaluate noise at an airport through a very specific noise metric, which is called the day-night level, the DNL noise metric. That's a noise metric that gives us an annual average of all aircraft that fly in and out of the airport. So on a yearly basis, we know how many aircraft fly in and out of the airport, what aircraft type they are, where they're flying to, what engines are on that aircraft, that sort of thing. And they have some very robust computer models that'll generate some realistic noise models that gives us the impact on the ground. That also adds 10 dB. It's a penalty to the nighttime operations from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So in other words, it's kind of quiet during the nighttime hours. They put a penalty on that nighttime dB of 10 to make it just a little bit more realistic on the nighttime hours. So anything that's inside what they call the 65 DNL or higher, it's identified by the FAA as eligible for sound insulation programs. So what that looks like is a contour around the airport of all of the noise. It's kind of like an elevation contour. You've probably seen those before. This is just a noise contour with the same kind of concept. What I placed on this is in 1998 is an old contour for that year when we published the noise impacts for that year. It was very large, and that included what I put up here is the picture on the top right. It included a lot of those old 737s, which were extremely loud aircraft. So back in that time frame, what's that? Did I say 737s? Yeah, my mistake. I meant to say 727 up there. But that was the very, very loud aircraft at the time, and that was the predominant fleet mix for Alaska Airlines. A lot of the all of the 727s are now out of our fleet mix, and they've replaced those with the 737s. And what we see down on the bottom also is we're seeing a larger fleet mix coming into the airport now. So there's a lot of 777s and such that are coming in, and we're seeing a lot of those too. Based on the newer, quieter fleet at the airport, that contour has now shrunk. When we looked at the contour within the 2014 timeframe to the 2018 timeframe up there, it's a lot smaller than it ever was in the past because aircraft noise levels are getting quieter over the time. And that's based on technology. Boeing and Airbus are making aircraft a lot quieter over time. So you can see where that extends out into the community there. So anywhere within that red line now we have is eligible for sound mitigation programs. Sound insulation programs, they've been in place since 1985. We've insulated about 9,400 homes, about $300 million for that. We've done 246 condominiums, 8 Highline schools, spent a lot of money on sound mitigation around the airport. Noise monitoring, we have noise monitors on both sides of the airport, but again, since we're here, we wanted to make sure we understood what the noise monitoring was south of the airport. So we have quite a few noise monitors all the way down into the Twin Lakes area. Just to be clear what a noise monitor does, it really helps us give information to the community on what a noise level for really one specific event would be. It's not used to change those noise contours, and it's not really used to do anything with the sound insulation program. The FAA does not allow noise monitoring data to be used in that fashion, so it's more of an informational thing to a community. As we probably, as you may have heard, we've had a runway under construction. Our center runway had to go completely down to the ground and be rebuilt, so that was underway for the last few months. And we've got a few more weeks of work to get that back up and running, but we've had a little bit of different arrival and departure patterns coming into the airport, and you may have noticed a little bit different with that. So arrivals coming in are on the left side, and they are the red. You'll see they're coming into the eastern and westernmost runways, and then the departures are on the south end, all off of the easternmost runway. It's the longest runway, and Todd will give you a little bit more information on how that works here in just a minute. What's different today? So we have a few things that have happened throughout the years, giving us a little bit of understanding of what's different in the noise environment and the aviation environment. We have technologies. So it's GPS-based technology is what we call performance-based navigation. It's really a GPS-based navigation, and Todd's going to talk a little bit more about this too. So there's several different components of that, and he's got some slides to show you that. The main thing that's really happening, and I want to drive this home, if there's one thing you want to hear right now, is that we have a lot more operations at that airport. So there's a lot of demand on the airport. Airlines have been adding more flights in, and as you can see on the slide here, from 2012 we had 309,000 operations, 2014 340,000 operations, 2015 we're about 13% above what we were last year in September, so we're at about 286,000 operations right now, 13% above what we were at September of last year. So operations are getting more and more, and that's predominantly the change you're hearing out here is you're hearing more aircraft go over your house. Fleet mix, like we talked before, is updated to large aircraft, so that's a change also. I'm going to turn it over to Todd now, I think it is, for Greener Skies. Nope, that's you. All right, David. All right.
Thank you. Can you back up just one slide back? Yeah, thank you. A couple of points I just wanted to make to explain a few terms that you have here. Again, our focus is on safety and efficiency, the ability to move traffic for purposes of reducing delays. That's efficiency. So locally, I mentioned earlier that we have 7 different FAA and contract air traffic facilities here. That's part of the system. to give you some perspective, the combined average activity for those facilities on any given day is 5,240 operations. A lot of activity that has to be moved along. Again, we only move flight paths for purposes of safety or efficiency, as I defined it, and that is for reducing delays in the system. We do not move noise, and I'm sure some people can appreciate this, we do not move noise from one neighborhood to another. We just simply can't do that. We have the established paths that are the result of very robust environmental reviews that we've gone through. The last time that we did it for the entire airspace system around here was in 1990 when we set up the four corner post. And that was done with a very robust review that included communities and users and a lot of public meetings before it was finalized with a record of decision. You'll hear a little bit more about that later in the presentation. Stan mentioned about the tremendous increase in Sea-Tac airport operations. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of activity there. In the last 3 years, the air traffic has gone up over 21% in 3 years' time. To put that a little bit in perspective, we still are far below the pre-9/11 activity that we had at the airport in the year 2000. But the fleet mix has changed. We have more turbojet aircraft versus turboprop now too. So I just wanted to give some context to that. The next slide, please. Greener skies. I know you've been hearing a lot about greener skies. I just want to make sure that everyone knows exactly what it is and how it might affect air traffic. First of all, and I have to emphasize this, greener skies is a local application of a global initiative that the FAA has as part of NextGen. Greener skies in Seattle is not about departures. It doesn't touch departures. What it was is going and using this new technology that makes the flights much more predictable and efficient with GPS precision. What it is putting those flights in and allowing us to utilize some other types of technology. One of them is what we call an optimized profile descent, which has some tremendous benefits in terms of reducing noise on approach. And that is that rather than stair-stepping the aircraft down as we traditionally have done, and having them level off every 2,000 or 4,000 feet, and then having to add copious amounts of power, high power settings on the aircraft, flying level until the next step down, we now have the ability with optimized profile descents to basically put the aircraft into a flight idle glide, starting anywhere from 25 to 30 miles away from the airport, and follow this very precise path down to the runway. It's very efficient in terms of the way we handle traffic. It reduces dramatically the amount of carbon emissions that the users are putting into the air. About 22,000 metric tons a year is projected when we start flying those routes just from Alaska Airlines alone. So how does it affect Federal Way and Browns Point? It doesn't, because they are arrivals. And the departures are the same departures that we have been using, although significantly more of them since 1990. One other thing, flight path versus flight procedures. There seems to be some misunderstanding sometimes in terms and these two terms. You've heard me say with greener skies, for example, that we've added new procedures, and we're going to continue to add new procedures. I want to emphasize, though, a change in a procedure doesn't necessarily mean, and for most parts in Seattle does not mean, that the aircraft is changing its flight path or the track over the ground. It just means that they're following the route with different types of technology, giving them different types of abilities. So that's a little bit about some of the terms associated with greener skies, what it does do, what it doesn't do. Greener skies is, in fact, an arrival and approach procedure. It is not a departure procedure. So if your issue is with departures, you know, I still want to hear about it, but I want to make sure that everyone understands it is not because of anything we're doing with greener skies. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the the microphone back over to Todd, who's going to tell us a little bit more about an overview of our flight procedures in the Seattle area and sharing that with you for understanding purposes.
Thank you, David. Again, my name is Todd Thomas. I'm the manager of the Terminal Radar Approach Control here at Seattle. We provide air traffic services for all the airports, from just north of Arlington to south of Olympia, from Hoods Canal to the foothills of the Cascades. We manage all of that with our facility. Our facility is located in Burien. That's what we do. Okay. And up to 15,000 feet, if I didn't mention that. This evening I'll be speaking about the departures off Sea-Tac in a south flow and the arrivals to Sea-Tac in a north flow as they pertain to the city of Federal Way. I'll touch on the procedures and technology such as greener skies and how those changes affected air traffic. I'll try to clear the air on what changes have actually occurred. And I want to make a couple of corrections already on something that Stan said. He was talking about the noise with the construction, that flight patterns changed. They did not change. The assignment of runway, the final that they flew, changed. Okay? They still came straight in, but the number of airplanes that landed on the outboard runway or departed on the inboard runway, that changed. But the flight patterns around Federal Way or around the city or Seattle or anywhere did not change. Okay? I want to correct something that David mentioned about greener skies. Okay? He talked about that they start 25, 30 miles out. We're up to 100 miles out now. The aircraft start down around Portland when they're inbound. We cleared them, the Seattle Center and Route Center out at Auburn clears them for the approach, and they start down on this glide, this idle thrust glide, okay? But they don't fly it all the way to the ground. We're not there yet. And then I'll talk about that with some of the slide presentations of how that's working. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me just go to the next slide here. I'll go back to one of Stan's. See. Okay. It explained a little bit about north flow and south flow. The depiction on the left, the red, that is north flow. That's arrivals. We call it north flow. They're arriving from the south but landing north, and we're taking off north. That's what I refer to north flow. The depiction on the right is south flow. That's where we're departing to the south, and traffic is arriving from the north and landing south. We are 70% south flow throughout the year. The rest of the time, we are north flow. The majority of north flow comes with nice weather. So the majority of north flow is July and August. Okay? Not what you want to hear, I'm sure, but that's what it is, okay? What decides the flow is weather. Particularly, it is the wind decides. And that's when we have the majority of north wind is July and August. All right, let's talk about the departures. We'll talk about the blue lines here. As you can see, the percentage, we'll talk about the percentage in which direction they go. Every departure, every jet departure off of Sea-Tac that departs south touches Federal Way. Okay, and I'll get into detail of where that actually happens. But every jet departure touches Federal Way, the city of Federal Way. Okay. The percentages, when you look at the blue and what goes to the west, okay, we pulled the day's worth of traffic this last October 30th, and there were 395 jet departures. All jet aircraft depart straight out to a common fix located 5 nautical miles south of the airport, which is real close to 272nd Street, to explain that, okay? And they begin their turn on a departure procedure. Except southeastbound aircraft. They start their turn at 11 nautical miles, roughly wild waves. Okay? That's where they start their turn in the southeast. Unless otherwise directed by ATC. In other words, we can turn them early. But we can't turn them earlier than the 5 nautical miles or the 3,000 feet. And when you see that, and you can see it when you look at it, the departures to the southeast fan out. Okay? We typically do that because we have a lot of flights, especially turboprops, that go to Portland. They go straight out to Portland, and we'll have a jet that chases behind them. If that's southeastbound, we'll turn them early to turn them away from the prop so we can keep them climbing. All right, we counted how many jets went each direction to give you an idea of that. Aircraft that turn to the right and go northwestbound to Alaska, 10% of the jets. Aircraft that turn the right proceed westbound before they turn southbound. They go down either to Hawaii, they go to the Orient, or they go to the Bay Area. That's 17%. Aircraft that turn to the southeast, that's our greatest route. That's 40%. Okay? Aircraft that turn to the left and go eastbound, that's 32%. Aircraft that turn east then go north to Europe or polar routes, 1%. All right. In October, when we looked at it, 106 jets turned to the west and overfly Federal Way. That was 27%. The change in 2010, it was 83, and it was 21% of the traffic. So the traffic, that route is growing up and down the coast. All right, let's talk about the arrivals depiction on the left there. The amount of arrivals that arrive from the northwest is just like they go out, 10% that come in from Alaska area. Aircraft from the southwest, 50%. It's much greater that come in from the southwest than go out to the west. The reason for that is all that 40% that go out to the southeast, they don't come back in that way. A percentage of them come in from the southwest. Increases that. The rest of the aircraft come from the east. The 40% come from the east. All right, I'm going to talk about the departures. These are some radar tracks over the city. And I'm talking about the westbound departures. But keep in mind, I'm not showing the southeast or the eastbound departures. But what I talk about the west, the jets do the same that when they turn to the east. The same points they turn, the same altitudes. They're just a mirror image on the east side. Okay? So here's a sampling of radar tracks of aircraft northwestbound or westbound that are on 3 standard instrument departures. 2 of the departures are RNAV. 1 is a legacy or heading to join. They're flying fixed to face using ground-based equipment. Okay. That's what we have out there, but even if the aircraft is flying a ground-based or a legacy type departure route, they can be using their RNAV equipment, their GBS equipment. Over 95% of all the jets that we work in and out of Sea-Tac have that equipment on board. They're capable of flying that. There are a lot of different types of equipment. Okay? It's all GPS. RNAV was basically the start of it. We have PBN, which is a performance-based navigation. It's still RNAV, but it's RNAV on steroids to describe it better. Okay? It's much more precise. And then there's different levels of that as far as the precision. Okay, we'll go to this. This is one of the misconceptions is because they fly the RNAV that it is much more precise than the old legacies. When we go back, you see the difference between the westbound and the eastbound. We do not have an RNAV SID to the east. I say SID, Standard Instrument Departure. I'm sorry for using the acronyms. What we have is it's a radar vector SID. They hit 5 miles, 272nd, and they turn eastbound on a 070 heading. Okay? And that varies on performance. It varies on their climb rate, their speed. So you get a much wider swath there. Where when they're using the RNAV to the west, it's a much narrower band, but it's still spread out comparatively when I show you what let me see what I'm thinking. When I show you the newer performance-based structure, what it looks like and how tight a parameter that is. Okay? All right, so we're talking about this. This is where they enter, up by 272nd, and they turn to the west. Here's a look at it. When you look at it from taking a vertical slice of it, what it looks like, what the aircraft climb at. If you notice, to the left side of these paths, you start to see some of them level out. Okay. All departures off Seattle that fly to the west or northwest are stopped at 8,000. I'm sorry, are stopped at 7,000. Let me correct that. The departures are restricted to 7,000 feet, so the arrivals inbound are descending to 8,000. It's to separate the traffic. All right. We'll take a look at this. When we ran all that data, here's what we have. Of course, they turn out of 3,000 at 272nd. In the turn, as they're climbing and turning, roughly about as they cross 304th Street, they're climbing out of 4,800. By the time they're leaving the western boundary of the city limits, they're out of 6,000. Okay, climbing to 7,000. Okay, they don't stop at 7,000 unless there's an arrival there. They're restricted off the airport to 7,000, but air traffic control, if there's nobody there, they climb them before they ever reach it. And I got some percentages on that for you. Let me see. The number of departures that leveled off year to date this year was 24.7 departures. This summer, it was only 21% actually leveled off. All the traffic continued to climb. Now, what we're showing you here is just an average. Some of them get right up there at 7,000 before they even get to the western boundary. Some of them are down lower. They can be 4,500, 5,000 feet. The heavier ones, the international flights that are going long distance, fully loaded, they climb a little bit slower. Okay. Our traffic is seasonal. We run a lot more traffic, a higher percentage of traffic in July and August. One of the reasons for that is cruise ships. Cruise ships come in the summer. A lot more traffic comes in the summer to support the cruise ships. Not that we have control over, that's just where it comes from. All right. Here's been an interesting trend since 2010. The number of westbound departures, 2010 through 2014, was in the low 80s to maybe 89, 90. 2015, August, 135 went that way. Our prediction by the growth that we're seeing is it'll be 150 at least next year. I just bringing you the news. Just telling you what I know, okay? All right, that's departures. Let's go to arrivals. This is a sampling of radar tracks of aircraft, what we call on the mall visual approach. It's when we clear an aircraft, they say they got the airport in sight or they got preceding traffic in sight. We tell them to follow that traffic. We clear them for a mall visual approach. It's a published procedure. They have to turn final over or south of the mall at or above 3,000, the Sea-Tac Mall, Commons Mall. I'm dating myself. All right. Some of these tracks are their own. They're cut loose on their own to fly it. Some of it is ours. We're vectoring them to follow somebody. We're vectoring them to beat somebody. Yes?
You said they have to turn south of the mall?
Over or south of the mall at or above 3,000.
Why is that a rule?
It's been a rule for,
So that's like turning over the main population is where they're turning.
okay. But that was a decision that was made back in 1990. What? I'm sorry, what? Oh, yeah, I know. Okay.
We're going to get into questions and comments here in just a second. We're a little bit over our time.
Okay.
We're hearing a lot of technical stuff that really doesn't apply. We want to know what kind of changes we're going to get some resolution so our property values don't continue to decrease. So all of this is
Right? Okay.
let's go to question.
Okay.
We don't want to hear all numbers and percentages. We want to hear something happen. You know, what's going on.
Not yet, not yet,
Okay.
not yet.
We'll get there in just a second, you guys. Go ahead.
We talked about, David talked a little bit about optimized profile descents. Here's a sampling of the optimized profile descents. The blue is the optimized profile descent. The red is a traditional, or where we step them down. Air traffic control, descend and maintain, descend and maintain. There's a misunderstanding that the new optimized approach that is coming will be lower. It's not so, it's higher. Okay? And actually, the descent profile is higher. But the area you're concerned with is basically below 5,000 to 3,000. That's where they're in the realm of federal way. All right. If they're on a traditional, that variance can be up to 2,000 feet, somewhere between Wild Waves and the mall. It can be 2,000 feet traditional. With the optimized, between that same area, it's about 500 feet. They don't vary. It's more predictable. Somebody said. All right. The yellow track here is the RMP approach. Both straight in and not from the southwest. What you see from the southwest, I wish I'd done a better picture, but it's a curved approach. It's an RF, radius to fix. And what it does is it's for the aircraft that come out of the northwest. You ask about the change. When we start running these, that was a misconception that was put out in the mirror back in August. We are not running these yet. We're running the optimum or the optimized profile descent to this approach, but we're not running this approach yet. We were authorized in April to do it, but because the runway closed in May, we didn't. I chose not to. I've got 6 subject matter experts that are trained to do this out of 47 controllers.
What is RNP?
RNP is GPS. It's RNAV. Yes. And it's RNAV on steroids. It's a much more precise piece of equipment. Okay. So that would be the path when we start running them. Okay, I need to speed this up a little bit.
Yeah, Todd, we're about 10 minutes over.
Okay. So, and this slide, you'll find it in the room in here. You'll find depictions of this. It'll show the difference between the R&P approach and the MAL visual that we run. It will move traffic. This is just a pie I can explain later. We're not running them yet. We start the training Monday. The training goes through December, where the controllers get trained to start using this. Just because they're trained doesn't mean they'll run it. It'll be light traffic, it'll be good weather, they'll work their way into it. It's a gradual thing that we'll get to.
So, is it flying in? Is that what the slide shows, is flying in, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Todd, could you repeat that question? What did he just ask?
Oh, was that slide showing it's flying in?
Yes, that's an approach, that's an arrival, that's what I was showing them.
All right.
Yes.
So if you would, let me go ahead and close out with a couple of the key points that I hope people have taken away from this. First of all, we have changed flight procedures, but not changed the flight paths. Aircraft are not flying at lower altitudes than they've always been flying. One of the biggest things that's contributing to the perception, well, not the perception, undoubtedly the reality of increased noise, is strictly related to the numbers of increasing aircraft. And there's very little that the FAA can do about stopping commerce, any more than we can go and clear up the traffic on I-5 by telling people they can't fly. The only time that we can move flight paths is to be done for safety or the stringent efficiency that I mentioned, that is for delays. And the last time that we've changed flight paths over the region was in 1990 when we put the 4 corner post in. And we've been abiding by that for the last 25 years. It was after a very robust EA process, environmental assessment process. So, and then finally, you heard a little bit about the technology. With the increasing sophistication of technology, the aircraft flight paths are becoming more precise. They're not quite as dispersed as they used to be in some instances, but that has quite frankly been happening over the last 10 years. It's not a new phenomenon that has been happening of late. So I think that concludes the key points that we wanted to have with takeaways going forward. At this point, we have some time for public question and answer.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for those presentations. All right, now the most important part of the evening is to hear from you folks. We've got the yellow sheets. How many, does anybody else have a completed yellow sheet that we could pick up and we're going to start calling people? Anybody, any other yellow sheets? All right, thank you, Mark. Let me grab that. Any other yellow sheets, because we're going to call. All right. All right, I'm going to have my Chief of Staff, Brian Wilson, call these out. You've got 1 minute, and we'll allow you to finish up your comment, and we're not going to interrupt any answers, but we want to make sure that we've got a lot of people here, so we want to make sure we get as many people to answer as possible. Yes, sir. Oh, you want to?
They're at the front door on the counter.
Okay, Brian.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We'd ask that everyone, each person that comes up, to come up to the podium, please, to speak. First, we'll have Ken Logan, followed by Kathy Filbert and Rich Griffith. So please come up in the order that I call up. So first is Ken Logan. Okay. Next, Kathy Filbert. At the podium here. Thank you. Followed by Kathy is Rich Griffith and Michael Kuhn.
This is where you want me, right? Yep.
Perfect. Thank
My
you.
name's Kathy Filbert. I live in Federal Way. I'm representing myself, not my homeowners association. I live down by Knutson Theater, and I'm a real estate broker who couldn't sell a house in Twin Lakes in August because of the airplane noise. I understand all the statistics that were presented. I don't care if it's a 777, 777, a 737. My dad worked at Boeing. He promised me those planes were going to get quieter, but if you put them, and I disagree, even if it's more traffic then and the elevation hasn't changed, then we need to have a great noise abatement program, because if you look at Sky Harbor, Phoenix, Orange County, San Diego, all those people have a great noise abatement program. Sky Harbor's still working on it, where they take off at a higher elevation and turn further out. So I would encourage everybody here, we need to work with our city council to work on noise abatement, because sometimes it's a nationwide problem. There was an article last week in the Wall Street Journal with the FAA, and I think it's important to remember quality of life takes precedence, and the noise pollution we're suffering. I'm going to take an extra second. So you said, Mayor, at the beginning, to say something kind of personal. I've lived here 20 years, and my dad works for Boeing for 25. I'm a huge plane advocate, but there has been a change. Last week, I recorded 3 times between 12:30 in the morning and 1:30 in the morning where I woke up. And the reason I woke up was the plane was turning over at my house, and I don't care if it's statistics or it's lower or what it is, they need to turn higher, further out. Woke up my dog. On November 4th, I went outside my house to the smell of kerosene and called the Sea-Tac airport, and they never call me back. So I want to know who we call and who's going to be our contact point, because the FAA needs to hear more from us, just not tonight. Thank you.
Okay, next is Rich Griffith, followed by Michael Kuhn, and then Chun Lin.
Rich Griffith, Browns Point. We believe in sharing the load. And if you could share the load with this noise, it would be a big help on these southern departure right-hand turns. You say it's 5 miles, why can't you ratchet the time and the distance that you make the right-hand turns? If you go out 5 miles one week, go out 7 miles the next week, 9 miles until unlimited, and then start all over again, then we're sharing the noise. Thank you.
Next is Michael Kuhn, followed by Chin Lin, and then Robert Blix.
Yes, I believe that the major problem here is that the FAA switched to a GPS system. I believe it happened about 6 months ago. And I think it happened all over the country, because Phoenix is now suing the FAA because it happened exactly the same way there, where they rearranged the pattern and it's flying over areas where they were not flying before. So they're flying over us. I believe the idea is to save fuel for the airlines, which is great, but we're doing the suffering. And I don't see why you cannot practice noise abatement procedures just like they do in Europe. I understand there's only one airfield here in the United States, and that's San Francisco, that practices noise abatement procedures. And I don't understand why you cannot do it here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chung Lin. I live in Marine Hills. I bought the house last year and moved in earlier this year. And then I noticed that during the summertime that the airplane flies directly over my house, or between my house and my neighbor's house, just straight shot, as you know, almost led in by a laser guided system. Or it is that, and that's why to me, when I saw that you said the GPS on story, that just worried me a little bit more, just because because my house is pretty much lined up with the third runway. It will fly right over my house. If it's guided like what you show, it'll probably be right over my house every single time it lands. And it's just a worry because during the summertime, the noise is like a spigot. It turns off around 10:30. I noticed. I've been keeping track because I was all worried once I didn't realize that. So I came here to find out, well, what could you guys do to slow it down or to taper it off? But it doesn't look like, if it's based on commerce, there's more and more growth. And then, so therefore, I'm just a little bit worried about, how late that spigot will turn off in the evening.
Okay, next is Robert Blix, followed by Lloyd Doctor, and then Gary Grant.
The truth of the matter is, if you live south of the airport, you are on the wrong side of the tracks with respect to noise abatement. This is serious. Our neighbors to the north, Bellevue, Medina, Clyde Hill, West Seattle, they are treated differently. Whatever the gentleman at this table might tell you, and they are not telling you the whole story. Okay? The departures to the north follow industrial, commercial zones and water. Elliott Bay, Puget Sound. They turn at an altitude of 10,000 feet. Aircraft departing to the south, as we have stated here, turn at 5 miles and 3,000 feet. If you can't see the disparity, then you need some new glasses. Arrivals to the north are permitted shortcuts. And those shortcuts will take you over Federal Way, Auburn, Redondo. Those same shortcuts are not allowed to the north of the airports. And gentlemen, you know this. And I know it. I have over 35 years of aviation experience in the United States and overseas. The whole story is not being told. And the FAA can make a difference. They can change what has become a deplorable situation. Thank you.
My name is Lloyd Doctor. I'm from Browns Point, and I was the Federal Way representative when the four-post plan was put into place, and Sea-Tac had their Part 150 program. And for about 2 years, I participated in that, and I also was involved with an 11th Circuit Court lawsuit to try to prevent the FAA implementing the four-post plan. I can tell you, these are all nice people, but they're basically committed to doing nothing. They'll use safety, they'll use 1,000 different, they'll tell you about these precision approaches. They're all bad for you. They're just concentrating traffic over a few people's homes. So if you really want change, you have to go back to what went wrong in 1990. And that's when we changed from the original turn system, which was just like it is to the east. The original turn was an altitude-based turn with a lot of radar vectors. And they went to this ELMA departure, which is concentrated at 5 miles. And it just spits everybody directly to a 5-mile point, turns everybody, and it maximizes the impact on Federal Way. Goes right down 320th Street. You couldn't have a better noise dispersal system. We campaigned to get them to take it out about 2 more miles over I-5 down to the Port of Tacoma. We campaigned to get them to have a variable turn again. All of this, the FAA was even enthusiastic at one point, but they decided it was just easier to do nothing. And I can tell you, they're committed to do nothing. And unless the city, as an institution, gets involved, nothing will ever happen. It takes the cities to do something, because we're just a bunch of noise. We're good entertainment. They're letting us vent our upset feelings. But when this is over, that's pretty much what's going to happen. So good luck, City of Federal.
Next is Gary Grant, followed by Monty Cotilla and Douglas Osby.
My name is Gary Grant. I live out on the Southwest 356. The biggest problem that's been talked about is noise, but there's also an issue with when your airplanes are coming in. There is interference with certain things that you have, computers, TVs, radios, that hasn't been talked about. Now, when this first started, I spoke with David, because at the same time that this was being implemented, McCord Air Force Base was also expanding their reach on where they take off. In my neighborhood, those airplanes are coming right over our head in intervals with your airplanes landing and taking off. That was not broached, that was not touched, and when I brought it to the attention of the FAA, they said they do not regulate military. That was a whole separate issue. When I brought it up to the officials in the city of Federal Way, it was, we're going to look into it and we're going to get back to you. They still haven't done it. This is another perfect example of why this city should have an independent citizens oversight committee.
Next is Monty Cortella, followed by Douglas Osby and Jeffrey Morris.
Hi, my name's Monty Gutilla, and I live in the Twin Lakes district of Federal Way. A lot smarter people than I have been up here, and I believe spoken the truth, especially when they're talking about their knowledge of the jet industry and things that the FAA has not done and has done. Earlier this evening, I spoke to some of the members, and I said, I hope something good comes out of this meeting. And I said, you know, the Word of God says hope doesn't disappoint. And I hope I'm not disappointed in the FAA and what comes out of this meeting. Right now, from what I heard, I would probably say, shame on the FAA. You need to listen to your people, represent the people, and do the right thing. Thank you.
Douglas Osby, followed by Jeffrey Morris, and then Neil Corbin. Pass.
Yeah, a friend of mine was a 747 pilot back in the 80s. He used to pride himself on bringing his plane from 30,000 feet or whatever he was flying. He'd pull back all 4 throttles and he would glide in to the airports. Now, if one person could figure that out in 1980 something, why is it taking you guys so long to try to figure this out now? And I was down to Fife the other day, and I'm not sure what the mileage is, but it's got to be pushing 10 miles from the airport. There's airplanes that are down, it looks like you could hit them with a slingshot. And their wheels are down. So there's a lot of drag in that plane. So they push them throttles up, and them 737s come screaming through there. Why can't they leave their wheels up until they get 2 to 3 miles from the airport and then put them down? And another thing is, when planes are taken off, I was told that after they get up to 3,000 or 4,000 feet, that they can back the throttles off until they get away from all the people living underneath, and then go ahead and punch it. Some planes do that, but probably 85 to 90% of them, the motors are screaming when they go over Federal Way, and I live on the north end of Federal Way. Well, by the new high school that's being built. And they just full throttle all the way. They don't have to do that. Thank you.
Next is Neil Corbin, followed by Art Farrenby. Is that correct?
My name is Neil Corbin. We've lived in the Twin Lakes area for over 20 years. We've endured the noise, but in the last 6 months, it's got horrible. But basically, our friend, Bill Brower, who lives in Marine Hills, he can't sleep at night during the summer months with the windows open. he goes to bed with earplugs. The noise is so traumatic. His home, he claims, has depreciated by $100,000. Real estate people next door that are trying to sell a home, a realtor pulls up and the client gets out of the car, a plane flies over every 90 seconds, they get back in the car and they leave. The whole point of this is our homes are going down in price, and nothing is being done about it. The FAA could do something about it. We could introduce takeoffs maybe around 2,000 feet. That would take you out over Des Moines, over the water, and it also would go east over the industrial area. It would be a minimum amount of homes that would be injected, and there would also be the ability to clean up that, pay the people for their homes. We would have the planes over the water. We would not have the same amount of noise. Once again, going into these other cities, like somebody mentioned, down in California and Newport Beach, Orange County, I used to fly in and out of there all the time, and we had a noise abatement system down there. It wouldn't quit. Again, thank you very much for your time.
Next is Art. Is that Ferenby?
What's the last name?
F-E, I can't really read. Feckenby? Art? Okay, let's go to Susan Larson, Scott Chase, and Joel Cohen.
I'm Susan Larson. I've lived in Federal Way in Marine Hills for 25 years, almost at the corner of South 300th and 8th Avenue South. In 1990, when we bought the house, I asked the real estate agent how often the planes went by, and they said, oh, every 3 or 4 days. I did live under the flight path of the Renton Airport. Well, there's no, that's putt-putts. Okay, so my husband is a gardener. He's retired for 8 years. He loves the garden. I cannot go out and see the beautiful garden because of the airplane noise. Marine Hills is one of the best neighborhoods in Marine Hills. It looks out over the water, should be beautiful. I take a walk, and there are airplanes all over the place. Most of them go over 9th Avenue and 10th Avenue. Some go on 8th Avenue. There are planes that go right over my house. I'm 68 years old, I don't sleep well, and I hear the planes almost all the time. Maybe I get a quiet sleep from 12 to 3 in the morning. So I think your noise monitors are not where they should be. I think that the planes may glide, but I think the noise may be different in terms of where they are in their glide. And I think the contour of the land is also a factor, because sometimes I'm at Saltwater State Park and it seems quieter. On Tuesday, I was at Des Moines Elementary, which is on 9th Avenue and 223rd, and the plane was low, but it seemed like it wasn't as noisy. So I think your area of sound needs to expand, especially if you're using this GPS or RPM or whatever it is, and they're all going to go over my house. And it doesn't make it a very attractive place to live. And the property values in Federal Way are the lowest in King County. Why is that? We've already heard. Thank you.
Okay, next, I had just destroyed his name, but it's Art Felsenberg.
Yeah, good evening. Art Felsenberg, Twin Lakes. I worked at Boeing in the mid-'60s. We did engine testing in North Boeing Field. Guess what? The people up at Beacon Hill shut us down. We had to move to Renton. Then from Renton, we had to move to Tulalip. And Tulalip, we moved to Boardman, Oregon, because of local pressure on the Boeing company. I worked at Boeing 37 years, 16 years in flight test, so I know all this technical data you're talking about. I would like you to know that Phoenix is suing the FAA because of noise over a pretty ritzy area. And I feel that Federal Way should sue the FAA also, because there's no reason that you folks can't have the airplanes go another 3-4 miles south over Fife or down over Commencement Bay, where it's less populated, and you'll be at a higher altitude, less noise. And by the way, there's an airplane that comes by, probably a cargo, 747, older style engines, old 90s, JT90s, 2-4 in the morning. It's so noisy, it wakes everybody up. Why don't you control it? I don't know, but there's a military airplane or two also that's pretty noisy. It comes over right over the sound, just a little bit north of me. Okay, thank you.
Next is Scott Chase, followed by Joel Cohen and Jeff Cox.
Hi, my name is Scott Chase. I live in the Campus Woods area, second place and 327th. I think it's deplorable that departures to the north are treated differently than departures to the south. You know, you mentioned that this was redesigned in 1990 and the city has grown greatly and the density of population has grown greatly in this city. And it continues to grow. Things need to change here. There is so much noise. The airport traffic is increased. Okay, the flight that gentleman is talking about is EVA Airlines 25, and it departs Sea-Tac at 1:50 and wakes me up at 2:08 every morning. It's a 747-400, I believe, and I've called the Port of Seattle, and they said that they get constant complaints about this flight. And I encourage you all to call the Port of Tacoma and complain about EVA Airways Flight 25 at 2:05 in the morning. So this is the kind of thing, is that if we had flight patterns to the south that were similar to Seattle, all of this stuff would stay over the industrial part and I-5 corridor, and it should follow the same approach, the optimized approach that's coming in through Fife, and go out that direction and quit torturing these people. I'm at 400 feet. Browns Point has a radio tower and such. I mean, these are high elevated areas that you've now put all of the traffic over. And the traffic has increased. I've been here 30 years. It's increased. It's tripled since I've moved here. And it's expected to go up another 50% in 10 years. Something needs to be done. This is unacceptable. And the FAA to only consider efficiency and safety and not consider us and our quality of lives is unacceptable.
Next is Joel Cohen. Is Joel here? Jeff Cox, followed by Susan Evans and Chris Moser.
Yes, I want to thank, by the way, Jim Farrell for setting this up. I want to speak both for myself and my father, who's in a nursing home in Twin Lakes. He joined the Civil Aeronautics Association in 1959, retired as a regional director of the Federal Aviation Administration. And this summer he asked me, he goes, Jeff, where did all these airplanes come from? My sister, who's an air traffic controller, asked me the same question this summer. My brother-in-law, also an air traffic controller, asked me the question this summer. But most particularly, my two corgis started asking the question every single day. It's apparent to me that something's changed. And you've given your explanation. I don't know that you've diagnosed the problems yet, and I suspect that there needs to be a little bit more work to determine it. It did, however, start happening about 6 months ago. And I will note that for the South End, the two largest jurisdictions in the South End that are affected, both Pierce County and the city of Tacoma, both of which have federal lobbying delegations, weren't included as part of the participation effort in the EIS. And for Federal Way, they need to be able to join with their larger jurisdictions in the area to participate. Now, you had the Tulalip tribe was involved, you had the Colvilles were invited to participate, but Tacoma was never invited to participate, Pierce County wasn't invited to participate, and both of those jurisdictions, as well as Federal Way, needed to be involved so that they could help look at this. They have got the professional staff to look at this from the standpoint of the local people, and I think your system basically failed, and at least from a public outreach standpoint. So number one, I think it needs to be revisited from that standpoint. Number two, you've got some sort of a problem going on because you sit out there and these planes are lower, and I've just witnessed that myself. And I just strongly encourage you to go back and revisit this. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Evans. I live in the Ridge, which is fairly close to a lot of the communities people have talked about tonight. And one of my biggest problems is not arrivals, it's departures. Where we live, and it seems, I'm sure everybody else feels the same way, but it seems as though it's right over our house, is where the turn happens, and then they are ascending. And so during that, of course, they're increasing their engines. Our house literally vibrates. Everything shakes. The windows are shaking, glasses are shaking. And it's most noticeable, of course, between midnight and 5 a.m., where we regularly wake up. Not just my husband and myself, this gentleman's corgis, my two German shepherds are very upset about it. And by the way, I measure noise for a living, and I can guarantee you the noise is above 65 at my house at night without the 10% penalty, or 10 dB penalty. Thank you.
Next is Chris Moser, followed by Bill and Karn Felt, and Britt Oleg.
Hi, I'm Chris Moser. I live in Federal Way. We moved in a couple years ago. We live down by the water. Thanks for all the statistics, guys. Appreciate it. I don't really care about any of those statistics. What I care about is it's very noisy. I haven't heard anybody bring this up. Do you guys remember your physics classes? Sound amplifies over water. So I just want to let you guys know you're not as quiet as you think you are. It's much louder.
Got Bill Feld, Britt Oleg, and Virginia Marquardt.
I'm Bill Felt, a 45-year resident of Marine Hills. I've had a request from somebody else in the audience who would like to know what the number of the line to call is. So if that can be announced before the end of the meeting, that would be terrific. I'd like to talk about the 70-30 mix that there is, departures. We get 70% of the departures, and the North gets 30. As we sit in Marine Hills, I think we have to have white caps on the water coming from us on a north wind before the planes will actually land to the north. It seems to me when there's no wind, the planes are departing to the south. When it's 5 or 10 miles an hour, the planes are departing to the south. And it seems like somebody to the north has more clout, putting more pressure. We've got more port commissioners. We have no port commissioners from the south. And we're getting screwed. Yes, we are.
I'm Britt Olick, and I live directly below one of those thick blue lines in your previous graphic. I live in Upper Browns Point. I want to thank the mayor of Federal Way for having this meeting. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the Port of Seattle folks and FAA for being here. I have to say I'm a little disappointed because obviously there's a problem. This is probably just a small percentage of the people who are bothered by the noise. And yet your key points say that nothing has changed. So there's a discrepancy there. Obviously something has changed. I personally have noticed it since about July. The problem is you're saying flight paths have not changed, and then your last point contradicts that, saying that they're more precise. I think that's part of the problem. I mean, I've noticed since July that the planes are coming directly overhead sometimes every minute. They're coming in at 6:15 this morning. I heard them every few minutes. They're coming over. They're coming really, really low. And this is not something that I noticed 2 years ago when we purchased the house, specifically to be away from the aircraft noise. So, and then I have a real problem with your fourth point because that really doesn't seem like you're here with any kind of willingness to have a change, because we're talking about quality of life, noise, property values, and right here you're kind of coming in saying you're not going to change anything except for safety or stringent efficiency reasons. So there's kind of a disconnect there. So I urge the FAA to please consider all of our concerns, and thank you again, Mayor, and hopefully we can get this problem resolved. Oh, the other thing I just wanted to mention quickly, when you look at that map and you see there's very few houses. If you make the turn to the west shorter, you're going over maybe just a couple houses, but you're going down to the longest part over Browns Point so that you can affect the most houses possible. I think that's a problem. So, and I also like Mr. Griffith's idea of maybe just kind of varying it and not quite having that precise path. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Next is Virginia Marquardt, followed by Harry Larson and Peter No.
Hello, I'm Virginia Marquardt. I live on 22nd Avenue South, and the 38 million visitors that came to Seattle flew right over my house, every single one of them. My problem is that my husband was an SR-71 mission planner. I've lived on Kadena Air Force Base and Beale Air Force Base, and I'm very used to loud airplanes. So these airplanes, and especially this year, starting in March, and the big wide bodies, Emeritus is the one that flies over my house the lowest. I have a real problem with how they're coming in. They're supposed to be on these organized flight paths, and yet they're at all different altitudes in between. Emeritus flies over my house with the wheels down, and I can see in the wheel wells of these planes that are going over my house. They are so loud, my house shakes. My animals all hide. I have a cattery. My cats are, if you drop a pin now, they're terrified because they're scared of all this noise. So I don't know, you know, you can say that that they're getting quieter. I understand all this technical stuff, but the problem is I've been there 22 years. It's never been like this, and I'm very, very concerned about how low they are. I have called the FAA, and they said, well, they couldn't possibly have been too low because they were on a glided path in. And if I have a yard and I'm standing on my deck and the wings are hanging over my yard and I'm looking up inside wheel wells, then they're too low. I don't care what the FAA thinks. So I'm just scared about one of these days my son in Houston is going to find out that mom got taken out by Emeritus who was too low flying into Sea-Tac. So that's my personal story.
My name is Harry Larson. My wife talked about 20 minutes ago, gave her point of view. She thinks the airplanes are flying directly over our house. I disagree. I think they're only about 2 blocks away. I'd like to know the name of the representative for the Port of Seattle. Is he here? And your name, sir? Dan Shepard. Okay. And I'd also like to know, before this meeting ends, if there are any lawyers in the audience. Our property value is affected by the high noise. I live at 8th Avenue South and 300th, and it's an area called Marine Hills. It was one of was one of the nicest neighborhoods in all of Federal Way, built in the 60s. But we don't seem to have any clout anymore. We're an aging population, but I think things are about to change. I'm estimating that even for a moderate income home, their property value has decreased by at least $50,000, and a high-end home has probably decreased by about $125,000. I think it's time we organize, we get law on our side, and we sue the Port of Seattle. They're making tons of money with all these extra flights, don't you know? And where is that money going? It's not benefiting us. We're getting the benefit of the noise, but not of the profits. And I think money talks. And I think it's time for the people of Federal Way to get together, and I will be among the first to sign my name on the line saying I will join in a class action suit against the port, the FAA, and anyone else responsible for this noise. I'm fed up.
Next is Peter No, followed by Jan, Jerry, and Susan Peterson.
Hi, my name is Peter No. I am living in Federal Way more than 40 years. Also, I am Vietnam War veterans. I served in 1970 at Vietnam War. 5 years ago, I moved to Marine Hills Way. But I didn't know at the time that much airplane noise. So we couldn't stand that leaving that place. So I tried to sell my house by internet quietly. There's 2 buyers there. Then they come and sitting down, then listen to the airplane noise. They reject it. The one guy next day signed the contract buying my home. Then the next day he come here, no, I don't want to buy because of that airplane noise. That situation happened. Why we, especially Marine Hills residents, suffering that economically and physically and emotionally? Why we suffering while Port of Seattle and the airplane companies making tons of money? I urging you, you have to insulate windows, triple thermal windows, all Marine Hills Way homes, and compensate that. I urging you that. Thank you.
Next is Jan. Oh, there you are.
Gary.
Garrett, sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm from Beacon Hill. I came here because I'm with the Noise Task Force for Beacon Hill. And a lot of things have been happening. We are now involved as a Noise Task Force with the city of New York, Boston, Phoenix, and San Francisco. All of them are very involved with their senators. Now, if you talk to the Port of Seattle, Stan will be one of the first ones to tell you, we can yell and we can scream and we can complain all we want. Our airport was built years ago, long before all the population came in. It was chosen because it had less fog than other areas. It also had the space and the land that they had to deal with are the runways. Now, the 3rd runway was put in several years ago, and at that point I had gone to one of the meetings at Sea-Tac where they had promised all the noise isn't going to increase. Well, of course, we all know it did. But I do want to tell you that what is taking place politically, in order for us to get our muscle back, is you're going to have to vote. You're going to have to demand from your senators that they go back to Congress and fight for states' rights. Orange County is grandfathered in, and they have noise abatement procedures, and they also do not allow aircraft to fly in or out during the evening and more early morning hours. Tokyo, a city way larger than Seattle, does not allow flights in after 11 at night and till 7 in the morning. trains, no commercial traffic. So this is happening in a city that is wealthy and they are making money. So I urge you all to contact congressmen and try to get states' rights back. When you get your states' rights back, then you have a voice in Congress to tell the FAA, to tell the Port of Seattle, no more flights. Not only because of noise pollution, but your air pollution. I don't know if any of you are aware of it, but the EPA has done quite a study in New York and at Heathrow in London. And the pollution that is hitting your children going to school is affecting their studies. So there's a lot of things to consider, and I really urge you all to please try to get your states' rights back and get rid of this.
Okay, I have one more sheet. If there is another, anyone else who'd like to comment, please bring forward a sheet, and that's Susan Peters.
I'm speaking as an individual from Marine Hills. I live on 6th Avenue South and 298th Street. As I got into my car to come here, I looked up on 6th Avenue South and there was an Alaska Airline plane coming over my head. And I am not kidding. You are wrong when you tell us that there is not a noise problem and that there are not more planes. If you've got so many people that are coming into this airport, then go north, build another airport up near Payne Field or somewhere else. But don't make us pay. You've got here representing not even all the people, I'm sure. This is many millions of dollars worth of homeowners. Federal Way, Mayor Jim Farrell, you need to back us, because if you don't have this tax base, what will the city do?
That's why we're here. We organized this meeting for you.
I paid plenty of taxes. I shouldn't have to put up with constant noise. I can't stand in my front yard and have a conversation with neighbors. I can't be on my deck and have dinner with friends. My TV, every time a plane comes in to land, pixelates the screen. Now I pay $80 a month for my gosh darn cable TV. Are you willing to pick that up? Of course you're not. This is ridiculous that you make all of us put up with this all in the name of the gosh darn Port of Seattle. It's not worth it to ruin the quality of all of these people's lives. Thank you.
Judy's a religion.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for having this meeting. I live in Lakota Ridge, between Marine Hills and Browns Point, and we purchased the house 20 years ago, knowing that it wasn't under the flight pattern. I took a class today that said, consider the people who are not here. They have the conversation like this: honey, do you hear anything? No, I don't hear anything. Well, listen. It's raining, it's windy, I hear the fan. Right. Did you notice there's no airplanes going over our house anymore? Those people are not here. The people that are here are the ones that are hearing changes of airplane craft. I was born on Agani, Guam Air Force Base, lived on Whidbey Island. I know airplane noise. We were not under it, and now we are. Taking off south and heading west. And it's wrong. So that is like taking I-5 corridor, 99, where there's box, Costco, Winco, car sales, lumber yards, all next to a corridor. And it's like, we have new technology now. We can pick that up and put it over neighborhoods and make that noise, 18-wheelers, buses, transport, in a place that it shouldn't be. Just because of new technology and GPS does not mean that you can interrupt and change a corridor of skyways or roadways. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Judy. And Judy, if you could, and we're going to have some folks come up next who have not, for one reason or another, they didn't fill out a yellow sheet. But when you get done, can you come over here? We want to make sure we got, okay, great, thank you.
And they're white now.
That's why I couldn't find it.
All right, could you please introduce yourself for us?
Zach Anderson. I live down over by Brigadoon Elementary School. I've lived in Federal Way for about 13 years. I really apologize for most of you here. I didn't know there was an airport noise problem until I saw the sign. And I'm all for fixing this for you people out there. I don't want you to have to experience this, but I don't think we can fix our problem at the risk of commerce. Something like the idea of Orange County, where it limits flights in at 10 o'clock, could cripple this region. And I'm all for fixing everything we can, but we can't jeopardize the economy of this region for us. And I just want that to please be in mind, that if there's a way to help everybody without causing extra tax dollars or crippling this economy, getting people laid off because now the airport's closed from 10 till 7, it's a 24-hour operation. There'll be people now who live in Federal Way without homes because they can't afford it, because they won't have jobs anymore. And we can't have a better lives ourselves if someone else is on the street. I want the problem fixed for these people. I don't have it down south, but I don't want this region to suffer because of it.
All right, thank you very much. Now we've got another individual who didn't get a pink sheet, a yellow sheet. Sorry, during the council meetings they were pink, but for this meeting we did yellow. We had another gentleman, sir, in the back. All right, go ahead.
My name's Kenneth Peralt. Live in Twin Lakes area. Yeah, we get hammered by both the commercial and military, and seriously, those McCord jets that are coming in, big cargo containers, whatever they are. I could throw a rock and hit them, seriously. But the odd thing about those is that they will make sharp turns where they can be yet almost a mile south of where I live, and then others will go way on past. I'm sure they're hitting well up into the upper north end of Federal Way, and they'll make their turns. It's unbelievable. That's just the big military planes that come in as well. But I did have a concern about Moses Lake. I remember years ago, they always talked about Moses Lake was going to be a huge replacement for Sea-Tac, that they were going to build a commercial international port up there. I don't know anything about it. I never hear anything more about it. Is that dead? Are they going to do something up there?
Well, one of the things we're going to do, I'm going to talk about follow-up to we're going to get answers to all these questions. I'm going to talk about that as soon as we get done. All right, we've got one more. Brian?
I've got John Hall.
I want to thank the mayor for this forum. I live about 5 miles north, just over the line in Des Moines, which we bought the house almost 20 years ago, and the airplanes came in on 16th Street. And, those houses were all noise insulated because they were in that nice little envelope that we put up on the floor. Now, we didn't have any vote or anything. Nobody asked us whether we wanted runway 3, but runway 3 is now in operation very heavily. It comes directly over the house. There's no noise abatement done on the house or anything like that. And something's got to change because the property values are just falling out the bottom. No one's going to come out of their car and look at that house for sale and say, I don't need this. All right. I think that some of the things that my problem is with the Port Authority, not with the FAA, because the Port Authority is the one that's scheduling things, that's growing everything. It's growing like mad. Everybody's making money, but us poor retired folks out there are getting killed with their property values. All right. We need to do something. And the biggest problem is the big jets. Take that Air Emirates one and send it out to Moses Lake. Send the freighters out to Moses Lake. Quit building more industrial stuff, warehouses and that sort of thing. Put your port of transfer out in Moses Lake. Get it the hell out of Sea-Tac. Get back to the 737s and the Airbuses that take off quickly and they're gone. All right? Thank you.
All right. When I started this evening, I said we're going to try to keep it on time. We're 10 minutes past when we said this meeting was going to end, but we wanted to make sure we heard from each and every one of you. A couple things. In the front of the room, if you have not already signed in and put your email address, that is how you're going to get the answers to your questions. We are going to start a dialogue. I think Susan White was talking about, hey, this is the responsibility of the city. You're darn right. That's why we're here. We appreciate the fact that The folks from the FAA and the airport are here, and I'm going to turn it over to them just real quickly to see if they have a brief answer to some of these questions. But the critical part and the absolutely important thing is, it is fantastic that you are here tonight. We want to hear from you, and we want to keep having that dialogue, and we want to keep hearing your feedback. The only way that's going to happen is if we get your email address over there, or unless you, yes, sir.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I would like to say something.
All right, go ahead real quick.
One of the reasons they said the FAA changes flags was due to safety. I'd like him to explain why it's safer to turn lower and over the city, rather than go straight down 99 or I-5 and turn later. How is it safer turning lower over more houses?
That's great. I'm going to turn that over to David real quick, and then I'm going to let him give just a couple of brief answers. And the most important thing is, again, that we get that feedback. So, David, what do you got?
That's a gentleman's question. To answer your question about the safer what took place in 1990 with the four corner post was we were running traffic in and out of Sea-Tac in certain areas on what we called the legs, the departure paths, the arrival paths. They were on the same path. In other words, we were running traffic from the south, departing south, arriving north, head on to each other. We did not have separate legs for departures, separate routes for departures and arrivals. They flew the same routes. We held traffic down, the departures down, brought the arrivals over top of them, then once they cleared, we would start the arrivals down. That's why we separated everything out, went to the four corner post, was to have separate routes for departures versus arrivals. So we got away from the head-on issue that we had.
You know, I just have to challenge the truthfulness of your answer. I have an instrument rating. I own an airplane.
Okay.
I participated in at the time it was the four-post plan. I forgot exactly what you call it. But what happened was routes that had been dispersed that resulted in traffic going farther south and standing out on radar vectors got concentrated. And we all got really angry and sued you guys. And the port acted really angry but never did anything. And then, you know, we end up back here again. We just have the same problem, and this precise navigation is intensifying what was really a bad outcome. You could do what you do going east, going west. You could do what you do on the north end going west. You just have to go a couple miles farther to the port, or even just fan the traffic out. And I think I don't know why you guys can't respond to that. You do it on every other departure. It's only the west that you've got this very linear traffic flow.
Before you answer that, next time I can hand the microphone over, my IT guy just said that the folks watching on TV aren't going to be able to hear that. This is going to be replayed. So I can hand you a microphone. We've only got a couple more ability to do that, but thank you very much for that. Go ahead, Todd.
Okay. 38 years in the FAA. 30 of my years have been here at Seattle. Okay. And it was a head-on issue that we had. Right? The other issue we had was Elliott Bay. All the traffic came in Elliott Bay. It didn't matter if it was coming from the south, the east, the west. And the aircraft, we were think of it as a zipper. We were blending them in together like we do on Final today, except we were doing them in a turn and airplanes were belly to belly. It was not safe, and that was one of the reasons why we went into where aircraft 24/7 came straight in and straight out at the north end. Okay? The south end had a head-on situation where everything went out the 158 radio, everything came in the 158. Yeah, we still dispersed them east and west, but there was a percentage of traffic that went straight out and came straight in, and that's why we went to the four corner post. But you are correct. The fanning to the east, all the departures, procedures that we have are the legacy standard departures of vector heading, except the two to the west. Okay, we have two other ones that are being rebuilt that are just for noise abatement in the north flow.
So just as a simple city request, the city would just say, let's look at getting a fanned departure and taking traffic another mile or two down over Costco and I-5. 90% of these people would be much happier. And the reason this wasn't done is it was politically unpopular to make any change. I was told at the port meeting, the reason was, we'll just get somebody else that's angry. But at some point, the city has to become a good broker and figure out the best thing for Federal Way. And if you could focus the question, you'll get out of all this. These are nice people.
Sure.
They need somebody that's a pressure point.
Thank you. You know, I think we're right now at 8:45, you guys. One of the things I want to make sure that we've got an opportunity for you is that by the time 9 o'clock rolls around, our personnel, these folks here, and our personnel are going to need to go. So I want to make sure there's opportunity for individuals where you go back to the stations as well. So, David, is there anything else you want to say to kind of round it up?
No, I just wanted to say. Okay. Stand by.
Actually, can I call on Michael maybe, or one of the staff that knows that? Okay, 206. I'll give you the hotline number. The hotline number is 206-787-5393. 206-787-5393. Is that right, Tom? Okay.
Does somebody answer that phone, or is it recording again like the last time?
If it's during the daytime hours, you have an option to hit a number and it'll go directly to the staff in the office. Yes. We are committed to calling everybody back. 206-787-5393.
David, you want a few last words?
I just want to say thank you for sharing your comments with us. We've taken copious notes on many of these, and while I can't say that we're going to answer every individual question, there are a lot of trends that I think we can group together that will answer those questions or give a response to it. So thank you for taking the time, and make sure you leave your email address as the mayor suggested.
Thank you for coming, everybody. Linda Stewart's number, the director of the Ports Community Partnerships, is 206-787-7983. 7983. 787. All right. You guys, thank you so much for coming. Make sure we've got your email addresses, okay? Have a nice evening, and thank you.